On February 2nd, a single plugin from Anthropic wiped nearly $800 billion off of the enterprise software market. We saw the sharpest single-day sell-off for illegal content companies like Relics, which owns LexisNexis, all because Wall Street is terrified that general AI agents are about to eat the legal industry's lunch.
This was really crazy, is the only sort of term I can think for this. What we're talking about here is literally a plugin, which is just a markdown file. It's about 400 lines of markdown of sort of basically what is the system instructions of telling this Claude model, this Opus model, how to basically act as a lawyer or at least be able to do sort of legal tasks. You got to wonder with this, are we watching this sort of era of expensive per seat legal subscriptions collapse in real time?
Today, we're talking with Chen, Senior Vice President and Chief AI Officer of LexisNexis, which is one of those companies that have been the biggest hit. Her company is using things like proprietary data, a sophisticated legal graph, specialization in that industry, and trusted relationships with its customers, where those customers are able to upload content in a trusted environment as a sort of moat to counter this LLM wrapper revolution.
Look, Matt, let's not delay. Let's jump into it. So, just quickly, everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest episodes that we've got coming up. This is VentureBeat's Beyond the Pilot, Enterprise AI in Action. I'm Sam Ridavine.
I'm Matt Marshall.
Today's episode is presented by Outshift by Cisco, Cisco's emerging tech incubation engine and driver of agentic AI, quantum, next-gen infra, and beyond.
Welcome to Beyond the Pilot. We're talking with Chen, Chief AI Officer of LexisNexis, a company that offers research and information for lawyers and other researchers. Welcome, Min.
Thank you.
So, Min, you started at LexisNexis, I think, what is it, a decade or two ago. Walk us through the journey of becoming the Chief AI Officer and the specific point where you realized that you're just slapping AI onto the top of your existing service wasn't good enough, and that you and finding answers with AI wasn't even the hard part, but proving them was.
My journey with LexisNexis began back in 2005. I've been always leading my data scientist team and machine learning service team working on the AI related innovation. For every time we have this AI innovation in AI evolution in the markets, we're always there. We witness every momentum. Like 15 years ago, my team already started working on traditional NLP and machine learning. At that time, it's heavily on feature engineering. I still remember delivering this learning to run program that we utilize the online engagement signal to improve the search relevance. And then it came to like deep learning with bird-like model. It's really beyond just handcrafting features that model began to learn directly from the data. And we seized the opportunity to further innovate. Example here is we deliver this clause intelligence, which is a feature that helps legal professionals to identify missing or alternative clauses in contracts, and that reduces their manual review time. And then came the third big wave, which is in 2022 with the ChatGPT, and everyone knows about that. Large language model really completely redefined what AI could do, and we moved very fast with the launch of the Gen AI product, Lexis Plus AI in 2023. And then we actually shaped our product vision as a personalized legal assistant with the launch of Prodigy in 2024. The whole non-deterministic nature of AI is what I learned as AI leader. That's the same challenge we always face. So unlike the traditional software engineer, the traditional software engineer, when you have a bug, you can predict when the issue can be fixed. But in AI, we're not delivering a fixed outcome. We're delivering a quality of results. More specifically, we're delivering a degree of the quality. And by quality, I mean how relevant, how accurate, and how trustworthy those AI outcomes are for our customers. And there's no such thing as perfect AI because you never get 100% accuracy or 100% relevancy, especially in complex high-stake domain like legal. So managing that uncertainty and turning that into consistent customer value, that is the one key things we're trying to tackle as an AI leader. I think at the end of the day, what matters most for us is the quality of the AI outcome. And that is a continuous journey of experimentation, iteration, and improvement.
Min, so you described an evolution from standard RAG to GraphRAG. Can you give us an example of a query where a semantically similar answer like RAG was dangerously wrong because it lacked the legal authority, and how did that failure shape your mandate to build this more validation first architecture?
RAG is really the solution can try to mitigate the hallucination issue inherited by the large language model. In 2023, when we initially launched our first flagship GenAI product, Lexis Plus AI, as I just mentioned, we built a standard RAG framework, and that is powered by a hyper search, combining both lexical and vector search. And this allows us to ground models' responses in LexisNexis trusted authoritative knowledge base, which can help to ensure the reliability from day one. And then in 2024, as I mentioned, we shape our product vision into the Prodigy, which is this personalized legal assistant. To enhance the answer quality, we further advance into GraphRAG, adding a knowledge graph layer on top of vector search. This mainly addresses a key limitation of the pure semantic search because although semantic search is very good at retrieving contextually relevant content, it doesn't always guarantee authoritative answers. To resolve this, we build this point of law graph, which is designed to ensure that the responses we generate are not only highly relevant, but also backed by trusted, authoritative legal sources. So we go through the semantic search first and try to return most highly relevant content. And then we traverse this point of law graph to further filter out the highly authoritative documents. For example, some citations and might be semantically relevant to users' question, but they might be overruled or coming from lower level courts. So those are not authoritative information. Even though they're relevant, our lawyers will still consider they're not citable. If they're not citable, they're not useful. So that is why on top of vector search, we're building this graph search. Building on this foundation in later of 2024, we began processing towards agentic graph and shifting towards a higher degree of automation in planning and executing complex multi-step tasks, which is the key advantage of agentic AI can bring to our customers.
Yeah, man, I want to go deeper on agents. But before we do, I think there's another component we should discuss, right? So you've talked about that the RAG and then the need for a graph RAG, right? This really good intelligence on the legal side of a higher court decision trumping a lower court and so on. But then there's the customer data, and you had that brings us to the acquisition strategy. In mid 2024, you acquired Henchman to enable RAG on customers' own documents. So this is this classic build versus buy decision. What specific
Yeah.
capability did Henchman have that you determined was more effective to acquire, and how did integrating that customer data fundamentally change that scope of your validation challenge?
Yeah, I see the specific factor it brought into our solution by acquiring Henchman is their DMS, their document management system. Previously, when we deliver our solution, it's like grounded in LexisNexis knowledge. Now we add on additional value by introducing this solution that the answer is not only grounded in LexisNexis proprietary data, but also grounded in customers' data, in customers' insights. So by bringing these two together, we actually offer more personalized answer to our customers because the knowledge is not only coming from us, but also coming from customers' own data. So I think the major key value of that is we added additional formula, which is customer data and insights into the final answer generation.
That's this trifecta of information. So can we talk a little bit before we get to the agents? You stated that the standard metrics like accuracy are insufficient, and you focus on usefulness score of composed about seven to eight submetrics.
Yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
get specific? Can you walk us through a real example that would pass a standard accuracy test, but would fail this more nuanced set of metrics that you have for comprehensiveness? I mean, maybe
Yeah.
it's an example of the court decision, or is there maybe another example?
As you know that the common industry standard, they always just focus on, most of the time they focus on accuracy. In the legal domain, the standard and bar is much higher because beyond accuracy, relevancy, assessing whether an answer is truly high quality for our legal practitioners also requires you doing evaluation for its comprehensiveness, authority, fluency, citation accuracy, and hallucination rate. So we have this 7 to 8 submetrics, and putting together that forms an overarching measure that we refer to as usefulness. So the reason we assess performance across all these dimensions is that an answer may be contextually relevant, yet still be considered as unuseful. Also, very important for another metrics is comprehensiveness. So this metrics is designed to evaluate whether our GenAI response fully address all aspects of users' legal questions. So it's not just about relevancy. The completeness, I think it speaks directly to legal reliability. So imagine a user asks a question that requires an answer covering 5 distinct legal considerations, and our GenAI solution might give a response that accurately addresses 3 of these aspects. Even though those 3 may be relevant, but from customer's perspective, it is still incomplete. And this type of partial answer will be perceived as insufficient, especially in legal contexts where incomplete information can be misleading and it can even pose risks. So that's the complexity of the legal domain. The standard for what constitutes a useful answer is exceptionally high, and we have been striving to build trust in the system to deliver responses that users can rely on.
This series is presented by Outshift, Cisco's emerging tech incubation engine and driver of the Internet of Agents, an open, interoperable internet for agent-to-agent collaboration. Learn more about the Internet of Agents and explore how agentic systems are the future at outshift.cisco.com.
This is really interesting because potentially you could have probably the highest bar in the entire industry, right? I mean, across industries. I mean, obviously in finance, there's a lot at stake. And so banks, trading applications are going to have to be pretty accurate. But the complexity that you have for lawyers, right? The bar, all those metrics is groundbreaking potentially, right? So you didn't really, I don't know if you had a precedent or a benchmark or a competitor that you were looking at, but let's maybe we could, this is a good time to go into the Auto-Eval process. You're patenting, right? Your LLM based Auto-Eval framework, what that you've been talking through, which is essentially the core of this, this thought leadership that you have around these standards. So without revealing the secret sauce, can you describe the role of the human in the loop of this Auto-Eval process, and how do your subject matter experts, right, which are essentially lawyers instead of just agents like at most companies, how do they evaluate this evaluation system itself?
First of all, I want to clarify that this auto evaluation system, it does not replace human, it just empower them. We are using this hybrid approach where we just use large language model power test automation to do the initial evaluation and screen out the lower performing experiments. So with that, we could have human experts, our legal SME, focus on the final validation on the most promising one. So by doing that, we actually scale evaluation significantly while minimizing the common issues like subjectivity or inconsistent issues that can come with human judgment. Now, in terms of this automated evaluation, we have developed this proprietary large language model power rating framework. We use this concept of large language model as a judge, as a foundation for our evaluation framework. But we develop additional techniques specifically tailored to legal domain. I also want to restate that complexity even in the quality evaluation for the legal domain. As we all know, most of the industry standard automated evaluation, they are heavily rely on a predefined rubrics and ground truth answer. This approach works well for fact-based tasks. For example, you upload a document to answer the question, and the question mainly is in your document. So that is like a very straightforward fact recall. So you can build some ground truths in advance for this type of auto evaluation. But in our scenario, most of our scenario, like legal drafting or complex legal reasoning, they often no black and white answer, which means there's rarely a clear-cut ground truth in many scenarios. And that is why we really need to go beyond the standard approach and build these techniques tailored to the unique challenges of a legal evaluation. So I'll give you two examples here. One example is we know large language models are inclined to generate de facto errors, something we call hallucinations. So because of this, we never rely on large language models to evaluate hallucination. So for our answer, so we have this hallucination ratio metrics. We never use large language model to do the direct evaluation, but instead we build a programmatic layer to detect in your answer whether you have unsupported statements. By unsupported statement, that means like in your answer, you might have different type of statements, whether each of the statements can source back to a specific citation. So that could be the indicator of potential hallucination risk. If there is any unsupported statements, and that indicates there is a potential risk of hallucination. Since we're doing this large language model based evaluation, we constantly trying to align human and AI judgment. So basically, we compare humans' rating versus AI generated score, whether they're consistent or not. So we compare the score across the overall usefulness and other sub-metrics like comprehensiveness, hallucination, fluency, other things. This helps us to calibrate and improve the consistency between human and AI. If there is no consistency, then we first have this like large language model doing this agent-based reflection, trying to do the analysis to give the feedback, and then do the self-adjustment, and then we give the human to do the final review. I think this coordination help us to keep refining for our auto rating mechanism, so we can keep the reliability. We can make sure our auto evaluation mechanism is reliable. But again, this doesn't replace human expertise. It empowers them.
I mean, for something like that, if you're basically sort of, working out, okay, how things compare between the humans and the LLM, does that mean that you're kind of fixed in what LLMs you can pick? Like, new LLMs are coming out every day. Do you have to, sort of reassess every LLM and work out, okay, how does this compare to our human ratings? How does that sort of play out?
Yeah, it's more like the auto it's the prompts, the rating prompts we're using for large language model. We do this, we call it semi-automation. It's ongoing improvements. Initially, we decide to use that when it reached to certain like 80% alignment between human AI. So I think it's good enough for us to start with using the auto evaluation to do the first round of filtering so we can filter out those lower performing experiments. The more customers prompt we got, the more risk the mechanism will drift.
Is that something I'm really curious that, in the legal profession, what's the sort of spread of the prompts that people are putting into your system? Is it hugely, varied, or you kind of know now what the distribution of the prompts is gonna be?
Yeah, one thing we've noticed becomes more and more complex. I think that's because the more customers using our products, and the higher expectation and they have. When we initially launched this product 2 years ago, the prompts is customers trying to test with us. So the prompts we've got is relatively simple. And nowadays we've seen more and more complex prompts, which is why I think that's the right timing for us to use agentic AI solution because the agentic AI, agentic RAG, is meant to tackle the complex step-by-step related question that requires the reasoning. Well, I think overall trend we've seen is more and more complex prompts that requires complex legal reasoning. And that's why we're building this agentic solution from single agent to multi-agent collaboration.
Min, you've implemented a planning agent and a reflection agent as part of this multi-agent system, and you're seeing significant gains, right? You say around 20% uh, for planning in terms of usefulness over baseline, right? 8% overall for your drafting agent. Can you talk a little bit more about how those two agents fit in and what specific tasks they're helping with?
Yeah, sure. Planner agents we initially implemented for the use case of legal research Q&A, where we utilize agents' self-directed planning capabilities that break down users' question into multiple sub-questions. So, and customer on top of that, customers can review and edit any of these sub-questions so they can refine and personalize the final answer to meet their specific needs. That's where we've seen internally we've seen 20% increase by using planner agents. Now, the other agent you mentioned about reflection agent, that's for the use case of transactional document drafting. The agent can automatically dynamically criticize its initial draft and then incorporate feedback dynamically and then refine the draft in real time. And that is the reflection agent is significantly improving the comprehensiveness and quality of the responses, which is quite obvious because you have the agent to find out the missing points, missing clauses, or missing legal aspects in the drafted document. And then the agent can point out. So that's why the comprehensiveness is significantly improved.
Mean for those kind of agents, do they have lots of tools? Are you using MCPs and stuff like for that? It's very interesting. You're kind of talking about the planning agent. Sounds very similar to something like deep research that we would see from, the big providers, etc.
Yeah. Well, particularly when we like scaling from single agent to multi-agent, we would definitely leveraging lots of tools. Those agents always call tools. The beauty of agent is that you provide a range of tools. The agent can dynamically decide which tool best fits this specific question. Like for example, the planning agent, what behind the planning agent, we provide a variety of the tools, like semantic search could be one tools. That's the semantic search service. And then early on talk about the graph, knowledge graph, and graph search could be another tool. We might have a tool called like citation validation. It's kind of check that whether this citation is valid or not. And then we also have the tools like document analysis tools, just in case there could be the question customer ask based on uploaded documents. So to answer your question, yes, that we're using MCP. That all the agents they are calling different tools, and then we're using the MCP standard. It's a unified framework and standard can help us easily to do the tool use.
With these agents, the complexity and potential for error multiplies. You've built this great eval process, but there's all these multi steps of of the chain, right? When these agents are reasoning and they're calling on this doc, as you say, or this tool, there's there's openings for prompt injections, hallucinations along the way. How do you shift your validation pipeline to certify that hey, you're not just checking the single answer at the end, but at every step along the way?
Yeah, well, I say there's deterministic and non-deterministic evaluation with this agent solution. By deterministic evaluation is agent versus tool, you can kind of define predefined rubrics. Like for this type of agent that you versus this type of question, that's what tool, what should be the right tool the agent will be calling. So you can have this predefined rubrics. We usually call that deterministic evaluation. And there's non-deterministic evaluation is really about answer quality, the final answer. You generate the final answer. How do you evaluate usefulness, the comprehensiveness, hallucination? It's still very suitable for the agent solution. It's just on top of that, we build interim deterministic evaluation. For example, planning agent, instead of planning for 4 steps, should that be 5 steps? Is 4 step enough? Or we also review whether each of the steps is appropriate steps for the specific questions. We can work out the predefined ground truth data. And then in terms of agent calling tool, we also consider that that's kind of this deterministic evaluation mechanism that we can predefine, we can give some ground truth data, the golden answer. But for the answer quality, final answer quality, the usefulness for our lawyers, we still reuse our current overall evaluation mechanism.
Do you I'm really curious to sort of find out, okay, LLMs are notorious at the moment for being able to do a certain number of steps of tool calling before they kind of die. Are you and your team sort of sitting there on the edge waiting for the next sort of generation of models that can go 10x more on tool calling and 10x more on which agents they can use? Like, is that something your team gets very excited about, or?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think a different model. There's some models they're very good at reasoning. Although nowadays every model that like every big model service provider when they launch, you will notice when they launch the upgraded version, they always talk about two things. One is improve the reasoning capability. The other is coding capability, which is completely different scenario. I think they have noticed the whole agentic AI become so popular, and we always look into what would be the right model to handle the reasoning capability. There's a planning agents and the planning capability. There's a tool use capability. In terms of tool use, you're right that we're trying to picking the best model can smartly, intelligently. First of all, the new model should be the one that can intelligently select the tool. We pick the right model to do that. And second of all, every time you have new model, you really need to work on the solution about auto prompting because you need to kind of tuning your strategy, like under what situation you want to use the combination of what type of tools. So it's not just about selecting the right model. We're doing that, but it's also about some techniques in terms of how we tuning the prompting to intelligently select and use the tools.
And so do you have like a roadmap of like, okay, once the model gets better, this is what we want to implement, and then this is what we want to implement, kind of thing?
Harnessing our self-learning, self-evolution roadmap. But to be clear, when people hear about self-learning, self-evolution, they all panic. They will think that you let the agent to do everything, use the model to do everything. But it's not like that. It's always like bringing human in the loop. But that's kind of our roadmap in terms of how we can evolve the agent to have the best choice of the tool selection and the best choice to do the planning.
You've mentioned balancing quality and speed and cost using techniques like model distillation. So looking forward, right? You've built this amazing, probably industry leading validation engine, essentially. right? In terms of the evals first philosophy that you have. So for the technical listeners, who are in enterprise companies, whether they're in legal or other industries, how do you explain that balance, right? Because I think we were just hearing from Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb recently, right? He was tweeting about how they're actually not using OpenAI's models because Alibaba's Quen is cheaper and faster. And this is coming from Airbnb, very different industry, but they've actually done some great reports with agents kind of verifying answers, and so they're pretty serious as well. Presumably, if you want to get speed and you're looking at cost, you do have to cut down the reasoning. You may have to actually
Yeah,
cut
yeah,
corners on some of this comprehensiveness. How do you work through that balance?
yeah. Well, our guiding principle is to prioritize quality, and we're willing to accept some trade-off in cost and speed if the quality improvement is significant to our customers. Having that said, when the quality gain is marginal or not easily perceived by customers, we take a more balanced approach between quality, speed, and cost. And a big part of that balancing act involves choosing the right model for the right task. To your point, not every use case actually demands a reasoning model, because we all know reasoning model tends to be slower and more expensive. In some cases, actually, we do need a non-reasoning model that can deliver greater results more efficiently. And in terms of balancing quality, speed, and cost, particularly on the speed and cost perspective, we also invested in fine-tuning techniques, particularly through the model distillation, to maintain the answer quality while managing the cost and latency. So model distillation, as you know, or you all know, it's like I think it's powerful strategy. Basically, it's where you first train a large, highly capable model. You call it teacher model, and that model can do the task well. And then you transfer that knowledge to a smaller, more efficient student model. The student model can learn and deliver comparable quality, but runs significantly faster and at a much lower cost. I think this approach allows us to stay true to our commitment to quality, but without losing sight of performance and efficiency.
I mean, you've gone through this quite long, extensive journey. What's your advice for people who are just starting out with this? There's a lot of companies now that did come to the sort of game a little bit later with RAG, with getting the Gen AI stuff. What would be your advice as the sort of chief AI officer of LexisNexis for other companies that are doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, there are lots of things. I probably only highlight three main things. One is whenever you want to build Gen AI, Agentic AI, or whatever AI-driven solution, don't rush to do the experiment, build the product. You definitely need to do the experiment. But I think the first thing you need to do is to build up the metrics. What would success mean? What is your KPI to evaluate the success? And you have to know that how you want to measure those metrics. I think that's the first and foremost thing you need to do even before you start your experiment. You have to think that clearly. And second of all, that like if you are like us, like we were enterprise, that you do need to take care of the triangle of like three key components: cost, speed, and quality. Although you sometimes weigh in different factor, but the balancing of cost, speed, and quality is always something we keep in mind, and we have multiple techniques to address that. The third thing is nowadays our major focus is achieving a high degree of automation through agentic AI. But moving forward, I would suggest that building a deep personalization where human expertise and AI agents they can learn, reason, and grow together. I see the future will be a deeper collaboration between human and AI. And there's something like memory, particularly for agentic AI, memory actually play a very critical role there. That you could have this learning from either humans real-time interpretation, like human real-time collaboration and feedback correction, you can also learn from both short-term and long-term memory. So that can help your system to keep improving and keep evolving.
Yeah, fascinating journey. Really enjoyed the conversation as well. We're looking forward to staying on and following that journey you're on to that personal assistant. Congrats.
Thank you.
And special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Outshift by Cisco. You can learn more about their work on the Internet of Agents via their Linux Foundation project, agntcy.org. This open source project enables agents to work at scale across any vendor or framework with trusted and secure discovery, identity access, and observability. For more stories about the AI revolution, like and subscribe to the podcast and check out VentureBeat.com to sign up for our newsletters.